you've done. We are Mastermind with Neil Schwartz. Our special guest is Bernie Gallerini from, it's Tennessee, but is it Nashville, Tennessee, Bernie?
Yep, I live in a suburb of Nashville. Nashville's my market. I live in a little suburb lake community called Hendersonville, but all of Nashville's my market.
Oh, that's fantastic. Very, very, very cool. Well, so give us a little Reader's Digest version of Bernie. You've been in the business how long, number of transactions, kind of your ascension to where you are today. Just a couple minutes on that.
Yeah, been in the business 16 years, started in 05. Probably a lot like all of your agents. I prospected 4 or 5 hours a day. When I started, sold 40 homes in my first year. Escalated from there. The recession hit in 06, 07, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So all of the opportunities to call expireds and buy owners were all there. I had a year to 2 years to work on a lot of skill. And then I had an opportunity for several years to really take advantage of the skills that I learned through Mike Ferry. And that was just taking a bunch of listings and selling a bunch of houses. So I climbed up the ranks of just selling houses, 40 houses, 58, 73, I got to 108, 134, and then I got to about 147 personal sales. Had a couple of buyer's agents, so we were doing close to about 200. And I just started kind of focusing more on helping other agents in my community, just like you, Neil, where I just felt the Mike Ferry organization offered the best skills and training in the industry. And so I brought in a few agents, and so now we're doing a fairly decent job. We're at 470 closed. We're probably going to land at about 700 transactions this year.
Wow.
And, yeah, so it's been a really great ride, but I will say it has been all based on the discipline of the MFO system and just hanging out with great people like you and all the awesome, fantastic, Mike Ferry top producers that I've got to meet over the years.
Got it. Well, that's great. Now, did you moved from, was it Vegas?
Yeah.
Yeah, you actually started your career in Las Vegas, correct?
Well, I actually had a license in Las Vegas, but I never sold real estate till I moved here. So I just had gotten a license. My wife wanted to make a decision to kind of get out of Sin City we had 2 little girls at the time. Nothing wrong with Vegas, but just was, we had kind of come to the end of the road. So I moved out here and decided I was going to go into real estate full time. And so I signed up. But matter of fact, I'm not from the South. So, I'm a Italian kid that talks really fast, and I didn't speak Southern language. So I started looking for, nothing against my Southern friends. I don't think it's really Southern language, but I didn't have the Southern draw and understand all the little nuances to the Southern people. So I went online and started looking for a coach and interviewed a couple of others and landed on the Mike Ferry system. And so I moved here in 04, in August of 04, started selling in January of 05. And the best part is I knew one person in this entire city, and that person had moved here 3 weeks before I did. So he didn't really know anybody. And the only way to get business was to call expired and buy owners. So that's what I did.
Wow. That's a great story. So as a number of top agents like yourself started either in a new city or started in a town where they didn't really have past client and sphere, you guys all say, my sense is you're saying the same thing, is that you had a huge advantage by not having people that you really knew as past client and sphere in the very beginning.
Well, I think that when you get into the business and you don't really have any friends or family in the area, it forced us to have to create that other ways. And so, I mean, it's weird. It's still weird today, I got to be honest with you, is that I don't really know any other way than past client center of influence and expired in I should say now it's past client center of influence. But back in those days, it was just expired and buy owners. And so I didn't have friends. I didn't have family. I didn't know any person. The one person I knew didn't know anyone. So it was really, I look back on how crazy it is today. Like going, gosh, I've built this great, fantastic business. I got, lots and lots and thousands of people in my database, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of past client center of influence in there. And you look at this and go, well, how did all this get created? It got created from calling it expired and taking a listing and tripping and falling and screwing it all up. I was telling a story the other day about one of my very first listing presentations, and I had gone in there, and the guy said to me, I think I was probably in the presentation about 2.5 hours, Neil, I'm guessing.
Wow.
And the guy said to me, he said, "Man, your wife must just be numb." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "You just talk and talk and talk and talk." So I got on the phone, I called my coach on the way home, and he says, "Well, did you follow the presentation?" And I said, "What presentation?" He says, "The one that's on the Mike Ferry site." I'm like, "No." He goes, "Download that presentation and you handwrite that thing 40 times. I want you to handwrite that 40 times. And then my presentation went from a 2-hour presentation to about a 30-minute presentation. So I've had a lot of hard knocks moving up the ranks here.
Oh, it's a great story. Let me ask you something. So you said that your first year as a standing start was 40 transactions-ish?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what, and I get that it has to be expireds and for sale by owners, and clearly a lot of our markets in the past and even now have some for sale by owners and expireds, but where does your mindset have to be to do that? Because each city and each area does have opportunity, and there are story after story after story, even today during COVID, of people like yourself doing 30, 40 transactions a year, and yet we run into agents all the time that they do 10 or 12 and they can't even understand how anyone does 15. So talk to me, help me help them on what that mindset has to look like, Bernie.
Well, I think you opened a little bit of Pandora's box, because I think there's several components to that answer, or several answers I can have to that question. Well, the first thing is, I think it was mindset. And I made a decision early on within the first few months that I was no longer a real estate agent, that I was going to be a very highly paid telemarketer. So
Interesting.
I made a decision that I wasn't going to be an agent, that I was going to be a telemarketer, and that my business was made on the phone. So if I could spend 4, 5, 6, 8 hours every day on the phone, I could make several $100,000 doing this kind of work. And so once I made that decision that I wasn't a realtor, and that I had a schedule that, for all intents and purposes, had me on the phone 90% of the time, that I would make enough money for my family and I. So number one, it was my mindset of not being a realtor and being a telemarketer.
Bernie, one second, because that's a huge thought. All right. So first of all, I want to pause there just for a second for effect. But where did that come from? Because that's not normal thinking. Certainly not the normal thinking I'm thinking.
Well, I mean, I think Mike Ferry, if he was on this call, he'd say that we make all of our money on the phones.
You're right.
I bought into that concept early, that the more I'm on the phones, the more money I'll make. And so I just always believed that the more time I spent on the phone, the more money I would receive, and I was about making more money. So I'm fairly disciplined, Neil, in a schedule. So I won't mention names, but I met somebody at Mike Ferry event my first year who had a lot of success in MFO, is no longer in MFO, but had a lot of success in MFO. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, what's the 1 or 2 things you can share with me to help me grow my business?" And I think it was the first retreat in Palm Desert I was at. And he said, "Do you have a schedule?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Follow it." And I laughed and I said, "Well, no, I mean, really." And he goes, "If you write out a schedule and you follow it, you'll have as much money as you want to have. It's when you write out a schedule and you don't follow it is where all the problems come about." So I just wrote a schedule that said I was going to be on the phones from 8 until noon every day without any distractions. Mike always said, "If you give me from 8 to noon, I'll make you rich. I don't care what you do with the rest of the part of your day, but from 8 to noon on the phones will make you rich. And if you don't have an appointment in the afternoon, you can go home." I thought that was a pretty interesting concept. So I said, "Well, what you're saying then is all I have to do is work for 4 hours a day." And he said, "Yes, 4 hours a day, 8 to noon on the phones. If you don't have an appointment, you can go home." Well, that was the plan I worked. And so I worked from 8 a.m. to 12 noon every day. I had so many appointments that I was working in the afternoon on listing appointments. I was negotiating offers. I was doing price adjustments. And before I know it, I had 30, 40 listings on the board, and I was putting in, 8, 10, 12-hour days. So it was a little bit of a trick. I followed the schedule. I listened to Mike. I worked till noon, had listing appointments, and then it just took off from there.
That's amazing. That's a fantastic story. So mindset. What the mindset, is that the important part that helps you see beyond the 40? Because we have a number of agents that talk about this all the time. They're in overwhelm at 10. They have 3 or 4 listings and 2 or 3 sales, and they're in overwhelm. Right now, how many transactions do you open in a month? More or less.
Well, I would tell you right now, about 2 months ago, I had, between myself and my buyer's agents, I had 122 pendings. Right now, I think I have 96 pendings. Now I have a team of people that help me kind of get all through those buyers and those listings and things like that. So there's other people involved. I'll say this to your people that get overwhelmed at 10 or 5 or whatever. I think if you have, for those that have children, you have 1 child, it can be a little overwhelming. If you have 2, it's even more so. If you have 3, you're an overwhelm. And pretty soon, if you have 4 or 5 or 6 kids or whatever it may be, you're just kind of numb, right? It's just you're an overwhelm all the time. And so what I would say to you is you rise to the occasion. And if you were raising 5 children and then all of a sudden you only had 1, you'd go, well, this is pretty easy. So I think it's, I say this to the people in my group. It's like a rubber band or a balloon. If you keep blowing up a balloon and then you let all the air go out of it, the balloon does not go back to the original size. If you have a rubber band and you kind of keep doing this with the rubber band, eventually it starts to grow, and you don't want to pull it too hard because it'll break, but you want to slowly work it so it stretches, just like a balloon. And I think that that's what you do with your tolerance of things. So if you're overwhelmed with 3 pendings or 5 pendings or 8, try to handle 90. And then what you do is, I didn't build to 90. I mean, I built to 90. I just didn't have 90. And so I had, 3, and then I had 10, and then I had 22, and then I had 48. And then the tolerance level got to a point where it's just kind of numb. There's always, when you got 100 pendings on the board, there's always a problem every day with everybody. And you just learn to sort the cards as it may be, solve the problem, and you move on, and you become a problem solver. And that's the world we live in today. We're just solving, inspection issues and financing issues and, buyer and seller issues and all sorts of things that go along with that. But you will do it if you want to do it, and you will come to the point where you can handle it as you grow. That's
fantastic. That's great. Great advice. Thank you. Thank you. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about COVID-19.
What's that?
So did it affect you? Did it bother you? Did you run right over it? Talk to me.
Wow. I'm going to have probably an unpopular answer here, okay? I don't live in California, so I don't know what you guys are dealing with, but I can tell you out here, it has not been that big of a deal. Is it a big deal in the country? Yes. Do people run around wearing masks? Yes. I'm 53 sales higher this year than I was last year at this same time, so we're selling more homes than we did last year. I've been in all the listing presentations I've been in. I've had to wear a mask 1 time. Out of all my listing presentations, only 1 client has ever asked me to put a mask on. I don't believe, 99% of the time, the buyer's agents are all saying that nobody really cares about whether you have a mask on or not, whether you go in their home. Some buyers will show up with masks on. I think as far as listing property goes, we are very cautious and careful with how other people feel. So we go through the protocol of gloves and masks and booties, desensitization, all that kind of stuff. So we go through that gamut of conversation with every seller. But what we're finding here in Tennessee is that most of the people that we work with are not overly concerned with selling their house in that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
I know
that's
it's not
how it works.
popular. You in California, you guys are going through a ton of stuff. I'm not saying we're not going through it. We're just probably not going through it at the level you guys are.
Got it. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So past client and sphere, is that where the business is coming from for you now?
Yeah, so I do a fair amount of marketing for my agents. So I buy a bunch of online stuff. In the growth of the team, we've learned to spend money and then also watch every dollar. So I'm a proponent of one that markets a ton of money for my agents to work with buyers. I would say about 35% or so of that, and that fluctuates a little bit from year in and year out, but about 35% of my business is referral, COI kind of past client stuff.
Okay. Got it. All right. And how much of your business today is your listings taken?
So how much of my business do I just work on listings?
Yeah.
I only work listings.
Okay. And how many listing transactions will you personally take in a year?
Good question. So up until about 3 years ago, I averaged between 120 and about 150 personal listing sales per year. Over the last 36 months, that has dropped. So 2 years ago, I did 77. Last year, I did 62. And this year, I'll probably land at around 35 to 38, somewhere in that range is what I'm tracking for. So what I do now, Neil, is, and this will probably make some sense, I've moved into a higher price point. So my average sales price for Nashville is just over $300,000. My personal average sales price is $900,000. So what I did was I moved away from that price point, started only calling the higher end marketplace. So even though I'm selling less houses, I'm still making the same personal money that I was making before. I just changed my commission checks.
Yeah. Got it. So how'd you do that? I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, that's in a big way, but how did you approach changing that price point for yourself? How could you take what you did and share with our people to maybe help them in moving the price points?
Sure. So when I first started in real estate here in Nashville, you guys have to understand I don't live in California, so house prices are a little bit different. So when my first year in business here, my average sales price was $145,000, $150,000, I should say. I'm sorry, my average check was $4,500. I then moved into the 250 price point, so I only called everything over 250. And then at some point, I moved into the $300,000 price point, so I never called anything under $300,000. Remember, my business was all expired, so I could easily just throw out all the lower end stuff and just kind of work my price point up. I did really well doing that. As I grew my business, I also grew my commission checks. And then I started building a little bit of a team. So as I built my team and I started really figuring out that structure, it took a little bit more of my time. So I kept moving up my price point because there was less stuff to call. The higher you go up in price point, the less expireds and buy owners and things that work. And then the difference in the confidence was that I was making an income off the team structure. So the buyer's agents, organizing that. So I felt like I could take a risk in doing that. Now, don't get me wrong. It wasn't as easy as saying I'm jumping from here to here to here. I would jump here, then I'd go back, then I'd jump here, then I'd go back and knock my toe in the water. You know, it was one of those kinds of things. But ultimately, as the buyer's agents became more successful and the income off of that business became more favorable to me, I then felt like I could take that risk and I could camp out up in those higher price points. I will tell you, it took about 10 years of back and forth in different price points as I built the company and I built the team. So now what does it look like today? Well, we're tracking for about 700 transactions. I'm going to do, 35. So you can look at the difference in what the team had done over the years, what we built over the team of the years to where we are today. So I'll never be out of production because it keeps me whole and honest with my team. But I certainly don't have to do that work anymore. I mean, the team certainly can support it on its own. It just makes me relevant with them. I have all the high-end listings, so they like that because the buyer's calls come in off the signs and everything else at higher-end buyer points. So it works really well.
Got it. Fantastic. So I still want to, it's like, how do we clone you?
If you figure that out, let me know. I need a couple.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's so. All right, let's do this slightly different. What do you think your superpower is, Bernie?
I would say that my strong suit is I'm a pretty big thinker, Neil. So I'm always looking to how to better my life. So I would say that's probably my strongest point is Mike worked on me for several years and I wasn't this person. So I wouldn't say it's a superpower. I think everybody has the superpower. I think every human being has the ability to get outside of their comfort zone. They just choose not to do it. And I think Mike Ferry shared with me some small things that I saw as big aha moments. And I'll share those with you. And when I realized that anybody could do it, I just understood the power of doing it, and it changed my entire life. And that was, and I've told the story on stage before with the MFO retreat, that I wanted to buy. Mike had asked me 8 years ago, and 8 years ago, and to give you guys kind of a perspective in business, I was earning about 8 or 9 years ago, $350,000 a year. And I had camped out in there for several years in that price point, about 350, 375. And I was kind of fluctuating in that range for several years. And Mike had asked me a question about where I lived. And I had seen him up in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he said, tell me where you live. I said, I live in Hendersonville. He says, why do you live in Hendersonville? I said, it's a lake community. And he said, well, why do you live? He says, do you have a home on the lake? And I said, no. He said, well, this makes no sense. You live in a lake community, but you don't have a home on the lake. You don't like the water. He was kind of ribbing me and teasing me a little bit. And so I, make a long story short, I went out and bought a lake home that next week because I was pretty inspired by our conversation. Now, what's crazy is, and Mike said this to me, he's like, when you buy this place, you'll see how it changes how you look at your life. And so I did. I bought the house, and my income doubled for the first time that year that I had purchased the home. So I went from a $350 to about a $600,000 income that year. And it was a light bulb that went off. And what it was taking what I would call a risk. And I started assessing what risk meant. And risk meant taking myself outside of what I'm comfortable in. So that box in which I lived in. And then Mike would challenge me on different things, like buying different kinds of cars and taking different kinds of trips. And he'd say, listen, if you're going to fly international or you're going to fly around, fly first class, stay in the best hotels. And so from that point on, I changed how I looked at everything. So I only flew first class. I only stayed in the nice hotels. I only, flew when I flew to Europe and spending, $20,000 in airline tickets and things like that. Those things all of a sudden didn't bother me anymore. They became a necessity. Like I became obsessed with the growth of getting outside of that box. And every time I did, my business grew, my income grew, the relationships grew. So the superpower we all have, every one of us have it. The challenge is we just feel comfortable in the box and we don't want to get out. You have to get out because that's where the power is.
Got it. That's great. Fantastic. So kind of what I took out of that is you want to double your income, buy a lake home. Oh, maybe not. Okay, I'll rethink that. No, that was great. So what? Okay, but you're not with Mike all the time. You're not with all the superstars all the time. What are you reading? What are you pouring into your head that keeps you expanding, like you're expanding?
I just started this book the other day.
Speak to Sell.
Anybody read that one?
No.
I don't know. You know what? I'll tell you where I am an obsessed YouTube watcher. So I watch, when I tell you I watch everything YouTube, I'm very open to anything on YouTube. And what I mean by that is I'm on a kick of motorhomes. I don't know if I want to buy a motorhome, but I just think they're cool, like $1 million, $2 million motorhomes. I watched one the other day on a binge of like houseboats and yachts and watches and jewelry and find places to go. And so I would say that I get my inspiration from believing that all of those things are all possible. I just have to, Mike always talks about don't watch the news, right? And so I cut the news media out a long time ago, years and years ago. I haven't watched, I don't even know what, I couldn't even tell you what happens in the world anymore because I watch zero news. I don't watch any updates on my phone, nothing at all. So I'm reprogramming my brain to think only this way. So my mind is only about growth. It's only about having all the things that I want. It's about having the vacations that I want. It's about driving the cars that I want. It's about, living in the homes that I want. It's about having strong relationships with people. So I don't focus really on, in some ways I'm protecting my brain. Zig Ziglar says this, guys. You guys want to write this down. Zig Ziglar says, if you were at a gas station and some guy walked up and put sugar in your gas, in your gas tank, how angry would you be? You'd be pretty upset. But he says, you allow people, and we'll say the news media, right, the mainstream media, you'll allow them to totally penetrate your brain and you accept it. Like you allow crap to be, and you open-minded to saying, I got to see what's going on in the world. There's nothing in the world today that is any of your business. In my opinion, is if you pay attention to the chaotic world, that will have nothing to do with you. It won't pay your mortgage payment. It's not going to pay your car payment. It's not going to live your dreams. It's going to squash your dreams. It's going to make you poor. It's going to bring you down because that's what the mainstream media does. That is not the world I live in. And so what I decided was that is all negative. It's all bad. It's evil in my world. It's evil. The only thing I'm going to do is watch the things that I want to have, watch the places that I want to go, see the houses that I'm going to buy, see the businesses that I'm going to own. Those are the only things that matter to me. And so for me, I don't pay attention to any of that other stuff.
I love it. I love it. That's great. Fantastic. Good stuff, Bernie. Bernie, you open to a couple questions?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so questions for Bernie Gallerini. Let me change the view here so I can see. All right. Albert, did you have your hand up?
Question.
Okay, go ahead, Tim. Tim, go ahead. Tim can't hear me?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, can you hear me? We good?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Bernie, so you said that you began your career doing nothing but expireds, and you kind of still do that business. What is the reception rate? When you call somebody, how receptive are they? You know what the rate is? Like 1 out of 4, 1 out of 10?
As far as people that are accepting the conversation, or I get a listing appointment?
Accepting the conversation and actually getting past, no, we're not going to sell. Click.
I think it's a really good question. Probably one that frustrates people the most is that if they won't listen to you, Tim, you can't help them. So if they're not receptive to listening to how you can help them and they hang up on you, it's probably just not the right time today to have that conversation with them. So what I would say is try not to beat yourself up on somebody that says, I don't need you, and hangs the phone up on you, okay? So I'm gonna answer this the best I can because I don't really know how to answer that in terms of percentage-wise, but I would say maybe 2 out of 10, let's just say 20% that'll actually listen to my conversation. But I'm not looking for the 8 or the 80% that don't. I'm only looking for the 20% that do. Right, and here's a good way. So my average commission check, let's just say, is $20,000. If my average commission check is $20,000, and I got to get 1 out of 100 that are going to say yes, then I'm all day just getting that 100. I mean, if you can make $20,000 a day, wouldn't you like to do that? And so the mindset is, I'm a professional telemarketer. I've got inside salespeople who are telemarketers now in my company who call all the time. Okay, they have to make 400 or 500 calls a day, right? They have to talk to 60, 80 people a day. And we pay them, $50,000, $60,000 income. If we can go out and make $60,000 a week, why wouldn't we be doing that same thing? See, Neil, when you said, how did I figure, like where did the discipline come from? Man, oh man, I mean, I grew up in HUD housing my entire life. If I could learn how to make $10,000 a week or $20,000 a week, and all I had to do was use this thing, and I could sit in my office, beautiful office, I could sit in here and I could just enjoy my life and play some music and have a good time and just talk to people and make 20, 30, 40,000 bucks a week. I was all over it. So don't worry about who says no, only worry about who says yes.
You know, Bernie, on that thought, we kind of went over it fast earlier, but most real estate agents think of themselves as real estate agents, which is something different than a telemarketer, okay? At least in my mind. And if I position myself like you positioned yourself as a professional telemarketer, I mean, that's an amazing mind shift. And I think that all of us could use that, probably that single idea, to make a whole heck of a lot of money and simplify our lives. So thank you for
Neil,
that.
Neil, let me ask you a question, because I know you have a big company and you do a lot of recruiting. How many people in your industry, and let's just say in your area, I know Mike's talked about these numbers a lot, what's the percentage of the agents that don't sell a home at all in a year's time?
At least, the way we track it, it's 50% of the agents in almost every company don't sell a house in the last 12 months.
Yes, so if 50% of the, no, we're talking about realtors. If 50% of real estate agents don't sell a home at all in the United States, and then the other half sell 4, 6, or 8 homes, let's just say, whatever that number is for you guys. Don't take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to piss anybody off. I don't want to be called a realtor because they're unproductive people. You guys understand? So don't call me a realtor. You can call me anything, but don't call me a realtor. What I am, I'm a telemarketer who makes a crap load of money, and I'm way overpaid for sitting on the phone. And so I'm not a realtor. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business owner, and I'm a telemarketer. I just happen to have a real estate license. That's all I have.
Right.
So I don't want to be a realtor. Well, I'm not a realtor. I just have a license.
I love it. Your real estate, I love it.
I have a driver's license too, but they don't call me, I don't drive for a profession. I just have a driver's license. I have a real estate license, but I'm not really a realtor.
That's great. That is really great, Bernie. Okay, any other questions for Bernie Gallerini?
I love it.
Follow that one. Michael, go ahead.
I love your thought. That's exactly how I feel as well. You know, I don't like to be called realtor, but thank you so much for that thought. My question is, when you talk to Mike, you're wanting to buy that lake home, right, lakefront home. What was your income like, and can you really afford it back then? What was that situation?
Well, guys, and I'll tell you something very interesting. Early in my life, yeah, I had some financial problems, and so as I got out of those financial problems and got into the real estate business, I was very scared to get into any sort of debt because I had that before. So the really interesting thing is I had a very low house payment at the time, probably like $100 house payment when I moved here. I owned my car. I had some money in the bank. And so Mike was really scratching his head on why I didn't, buy something more. Now my income was just over $300,000, about $350,000, fluctuating back and forth. But I went to a $3,300 house payment from having a $100 house payment.
That's quite a big jump.
Yeah, and so everything was uncomfortable there. Since then, I bought the house, which I spent, $850,000 for. I put $500,000 into remodeling the house, and so it got to the point where I bought the house, and I ended up putting $500,000 in remodel. I paid it all cash, own everything now to this day. Still operate that way, by the way, paying everything off and having no debt. But I now take bigger risk. And so what I found was Mike had told me something was interesting. He said, he was making fun of me because I drove a Range Rover. And he says, oh, that's a truck. That's not a car. And I said, no, whatever. And he goes, why don't you go and lease a car? And I said, well, I can't lease a car because I put too many miles on it as a realtor. And he looked at me and he said, well, why don't you just go get 2? Right? drive one Monday, Tuesday, the other one Wednesday, Thursday, you know? And in Mike's mind, it was so simple. And so what I learned, and the interesting story is, so a year later, I went and bought 2 brand new cars off the dealership. And then, Michael, I'll tell you what's really interesting. So I bought the home, the income went up. A year later, I bought 2 new cars, the income went up again. And what I understood about myself was I was motivated by all of these things in which I only dreamed of having, and now I had to pay them off. And now I had to get, put that money back in the bank or pay off these loans. And so it just increased my ability, so Neil said, to be Superman. But it wasn't superpowers. Yeah. It was just my ability to continue to keep focusing on a schedule and realizing, and I want you guys to write this down. I realized that everything I wanted that I did not have was my own fault. It was my own fault. Everything I wanted I didn't have was my own fault. It didn't even matter. I recently bought an exotic car, and I was struggling with the decision to spend the kind of money that I needed to spend on this car. And I called Mike. And I said, Mike, I'm making this decision. I live in a small town. There's nothing really like that around here. And Mike says something to me. He goes, if you don't buy what you want, then what worth is it to go to work and try to have it? I mean, to go and try to earn money and not really enjoy it at the level you need to. And so that is the concept I want to say to you guys. You have what you have because it's what you're willing to accept. Yeah. And you don't have what you want because it's not important enough for you to sacrifice for it.
Interesting.
Great thought. Absolutely fantastic.
Can I ask one more follow-up question?
Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. Yeah, so you're obviously a big thinker. You're already doing such amazing work right now. What's your vision in 5 years?
Yeah, well, I have a 5-year, I don't know, 5-year goal. I have a goal. I don't know if it's 5 years or not. I'm trying to work on what that time frame looks. Everything to me is typically a 3-year goal, but it takes me forever to get there, by the way. I mean, I worked on 1,000 home sales 12 years ago. And I said, in 3 years, I want to get to 1,000, and I'm still not there, okay? Yeah. My ultimate goal is to have a $10 million personal income.
A year. $10 million a year.
Yeah. And I'm nowhere near that. But I want to keep focusing on that as my goal because it allows me to continue to keep building.
I love it.
Great thought.
Inspiring. Thank you very much.
Great thought.
So much. Yeah.
Go ahead, Albert. Let's go. Let's make that the last one.
All right. Hey, well, thank you, Bernie, for sharing all your knowledge. And just to follow up on your last comment about every time you put yourself at risk by either buying a bigger house, a bigger car, were you constantly rechanging? Obviously, you were, your mind was growing, but were you rethinking or replanning everything? Or did you just find yourself thinking bigger automatically?
I'm always anybody in my office will tell you, this is the way it looks like today, tomorrow it'll be different. Because the economy, the real estate market, it's changing so much, we have to keep changing, right? So as we're building a company, as we're thinking about new things, technology's coming into our industry at a very high level. So to answer your question is, I think every time I got excited about something, I thought about how I was going to achieve that goal and could I get there with what I was doing? And the answer is this, and follow me for a second. The answer always is no. I'm not going to get there with what I want by what I'm doing. Because if it was able to get there, then I would already have it. So I had to keep changing what I was doing to navigate myself through the goals that I wanted. So I'll tell you this, when I made the decision to change my price point, pull back a little bit in my time, focus on my energy, on the business, I started focusing a little bit more of how I make up a ton of income that I didn't have. So I sat here in my office for about 3 months and I sketched out a million ideas. Just pad of paper, always, I got 40 of these sitting in this thing that just I write on all day long, right? I'll go through one of these every week. And so I write ideas down. And so I started sketching out different ideas for my company and I came up with this great plan that I thought, man, this could work. This will add about $800,000 towards my $10 million that Michael was asking about, right? So how do I add that money? So, well, if I do this, it'll add $800,000 in net profit to my company, to me, I should say. And so I then implement it. And then that's now starting to grow. And then once I did that, I'm like, okay, well, shoot, that worked. That's a first, right? That one pulled off. I pulled that one off. And then I work on the next one, and then I work on the next one. And so I will just say this. Don't ever stop thinking big, because there isn't one thing Neil has. There's not one thing I have. There's not one thing Mike Ferry has. There's not one thing that Bill Gates has or Bezos has. There's nothing anybody has that you can't have. They're just bigger risk takers.
Great thought. Bernie, everybody unmute yourselves, please. Let's give him a giant hand. Whoa, what a way to end this thing. Woo! That was fantastic. Bernie, really, really great job. Excellent job. Keep you wound up. Maybe keep you going for another 2-3 hours here. Woo! Very, very cool.
You guys are awesome, and thank you for the invite. I always love sharing, and anybody that wants to chat outside of this call, feel free to give me a call or an email. I'd love to help you.
Well, we appreciate that. We'll put your information in the chat box for any referrals, etc. What we do now is we take just a couple of minutes and we ask the question, what did we learn? So you're welcome to hang and see what they learned, or we know that if you have to move on, you have to move on. We get it.
Go ahead.
So again, Bernie, thank you so much. Really cool.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for listening.
Very, very good. Okay, what'd you learn today? What'd you learn today? Robert.
Well, first of all, I'm so glad that I'm not the one teaching the class after this, more than anything else. So I'm so glad Holly is teaching a class after this and not me. So thank God for that. Amazing stuff. I mean, I'm going to have to listen to it again because I couldn't write fast enough for some of the things you were saying. But I go back to the very beginning because I think this relates to a lot of our agents. Is you said you started with 167 contacts for a listing appointment, and I think you said 278 contacts for a listing.
Yeah, I think it was 238 for a listing.
238. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So. And here we are now 16 years later, and it's this massive amount of business. And I think that's really the great thing for our agents to hear, because when we see you on stage, we just assume that, oh, people just call you all day. You never had to work, you never had to grind, you never had to do this. And so if you're listening to this and you're making 238 contacts for a deal, that's okay. But you master 8 to 12 and you do that over and over again. And as Bernie says, you can have what other people have. I just think the fact that you were so real makes it a really neat thing, that it really is possible. So I think that was huge.
It's a great lesson. Thank you. Thanks, Robert. Okay, what else did we learn today? Other things we learned. Abigail, you have something?
Yes, I did pay attention to everything that he was saying. It was very detailed.
Okay, go ahead.
The one thing that I did learn is the more time I spend on the phone, the more money I make. So I think that's where I'm going to stick with.
That was a big point, wasn't it? Good job. All right, what else did we learn today?
Can I say something here?
Sure, Michael.
Yeah, I feel like he's such a big inspiration. This is my first year in real estate, my first full year here, and I feel like I've gone through similar path as him. And looking at him, I know I have like a future. I have a role model that I can truly learn from. Calling Spire, calling for sell by owner, spend 3-4 hours on the phone every single day, and just do that constantly. And it's just, it kind of strengthens my blind faith, so that I cannot say more about it. It's just incredible. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you. Armin, go ahead.
Hold on.
Can I add something to what Michael just said? What I used to do, guys, as on my contacts where I'd have 1 through 100 or 1 through 50, however you guys want to do it, I would put how much money I would make on a commission check and how many contacts it took. So we'll just use $15, or let's just use $20. So let's just say you had to make X amount of contacts. So contact 1 wasn't 1, it was $20, $40, $60, $80, $100, $300, $500. And so every time someone said, screw you, F off, or screw you, don't call me again, I would say, well, there's 60 bucks and there's 80 bucks. And then until I finally got to the number that averaged out that sale, and that sale might be for you guys 10 grand. So 10 grand might equal 30 contacts, 50 contacts, 80 contacts, but you will get there. You just got to look at every conversation as money.
It's a great thought. Appreciate it. Armin, go ahead. What'd you learn?
Well, I learned from several years of listening to you at the Mike Ferry. I believe one time I heard you mention that you were from a project sort of type of thing, where I spent a large part of my childhood in East LA projects and here in California. Telemarketing, people look down at telemarketing, but telemarketing is what you're a perfect example of somebody that your income is limitless. Neil tells us all the time, we have a job where we don't have a limit to how much we can make. It's how much we want to make. What do we want? We don't necessarily have to have all this stuff, but we can still have enough to be prosperous and have abundance. So thanks for reaffirming that. I appreciate it.
Good. Excellent, Armin. Great thought. Okay, go ahead, Timmy. Tim and then Yvonne.
Yeah. Hey, Bernie, thanks for today. What I've learned is that your mind is really limitless. If you can think of it and set it as a goal, you can achieve it. I 100% believe that. I really do. Thanks for
Good.
opening my mind a little bit.
Good job. All right, Bernie, good job. Tim, Yvonne.
Okay, what I learned today was focus only the 20% of those people who say no to you. Forget about the 80% who don't. And also Bernie said, nothing in the world that will change your business. The only thing I think is, the places I want to go to, what kind of home I want to have, what kind of income I want to create, and what kind of business I want to own. You watch zero news. Everything I wanted, I didn't have, is all my fault. You have what you had is because it's acceptable to you. So the reason why we didn't get to where we want was because we're not a big thinker. We are comfortable where we are at. You always tell us you are where you are because it's acceptable to you.
Because it's okay.
So Bernie's share really expand my thinking.
That's
I
great.
need to be thinking bigger. I need to think like what he think.
Exactly.
So
exactly. Good thought.
just want to thank you, Bernie. You are great inspiration, and you're just amazing. I appreciate
we
your
keep
sharing.
this up. He's never going to go back to prospecting because we're always saying all this great stuff about it. He's just going to sit here and watch this video. He's going to put it on a loop in his office. You guys are great. Okay, what else did we learn today? What else? Tess, you always have something. Come on.
Yeah, I wanted to know, is he, because he said that his tolerance level is really very high. Is he driven with pain or is he driven with pleasure? I want to know. Are you?
I'll just answer that for you real quick. I think it's pain because I don't want to go back to the life I grew up in.
Exactly.
I don't want my family to have that either.
That's
Not an option. Not an option. Absolutely. Good thought. Iris.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Bernie. I learned from Bernie, I am an entrepreneur, a business owner, and a professional telemarketer. So when I get frustrated on the phone, and this is what I'm going to think I am. And one day, and I hope I will be as successful as you are. Thank you.
I love it. All right. Okay, let's unmute yourselves. Let's give this Mr. Bernie a big giant hand. Woo! All right. Bernie, thanks again, buddy.
Thank you, guys. I hope you have a great day. Appreciate you letting me talk to you.
No, thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Take care.
The pleasure is ours. Okay. All right.